Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us for our monthly training webinar today. Today, we're going to talk about expense management within iSolve. It's a new feature within iSolve that hopefully will help streamline some of your process. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about building an expense reimbursement or expense management policy. Then we'll do a quick demo of expense management and certainly answer any questions that you may have. So let's talk about what an expense management policy is. So certainly with any business, you should have a handbook and some policies and procedures for your business. One of those policies probably should be an expense management policy. If you have employees spending money on behalf of your company, you want to make sure that you have a policy that they can follow to know exactly what they can submit reimbursement for, when they get reimbursed, and so forth. When we talk about the components of an expense management policy, the first thing we always have to think about is compliance, right? We want to make sure that we are meeting and exceeding the IRS's standards for expense reimbursement and business expenses, what those look like. There are specific allowable and disallowed expenses that you should be keeping a track of for tax tracking purposes. You'll definitely want to talk to your accountant about what those may be for your type of business. But you also want to keep track and have good records for all the business expenses that you are incurring and reimbursing your employees for. So that's the biggest piece from a compliance perspective. The second piece, when we look at a policy, it's about setting employee expectations, right? So we want to build our budgets around what we're going to be reimbursing for. So what allowed and disallowed expenses are there? So our travel, meals, supplies, those types of things, allowed expense reimbursements. And if so, how much can we spend on those, right? Do we have a company budget? Do we have a department budget? Or do we have a maximum amount that's allowed to be spent per day, for example? So some companies might say, yes, while you're traveling for business, we will reimburse you for meals up to $50, for example. So that is important to keep in track of. And the other thing you want to talk about is what if an employee submits an expense reimbursement for something that isn't allowed and it gets approved and reimbursed, right? That's a fraudulent activity. Hopefully that through our process, we'll catch those. But for sure, we want to make sure that we talk about how to handle that if and when it happens. So those are important things to keep in mind. Then part of your policy should be your process, right? How do employees submit their expense reimbursements? Do they get an advance if they're traveling or if they have some sort of expense that they need to do? Are there pre-approvals required? Things like a purchase order, perhaps, that need to be reviewed and approved before you spend the money. Those are things to think about as well. Once an expense has been incurred, how does it get approved? And then most importantly to the employee, how does it get paid out, right? And then how does it get tracked through your internal systems? So these are all different process and procedure questions you want to answer within your process. When we look at any policy, we always want to try to keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate your life. Don't try to manage through your policy. Don't try to manage your employees' lives, for example, through your policy. Be flexible because there are going to be situations that arise that you don't foresee today. So always having a way to be flexible is important. And then the most important thing to keep you out of compliance or liability jail is to be fair to all. So what applies to one employee should apply to all employees, and it should be applied consistently across the board. So when you're thinking about writing an expense management policy, these are all things to think about. We're certainly happy to help you advise you on what you may want to put in or keep out of your expense management policy as you're working through that. But before you create any process, it's good to have a policy. That leads us to expense management within iSolve. So within iSolve, we now have an expense management module that is an automated expense reimbursement process. This allows employees to submit reimbursement requests for them to be reviewed, approved, run through different rules and eligibility requirements so that you're keeping track of your policy, keeping your policy on track, right? It allows you to reimburse your employees faster, which improves employee satisfaction and reduces your administrative burden. So as soon as an employee incurs an expense, they are traveling or whatever, they can snap right from their phone, right from myhrstuff.com, capture that expense, submit it for reimbursement, and get approved and paid out through payroll. Like we talked about before, iSolve Expense Management allows you to enforce your expense policy. So if you have limits or restrictions on what can be submitted for expenses, you can keep track of that, and we can set those guardrails in the system. This reduces errors, it eliminates fraud, and it keeps everybody on the up and up, which is really, really nice. Probably the most important from an admin perspective is you're able to allocate these expenses directly through our general ledger integration. So when expenses are paid out, they'll show on the payroll reports. They'll be paid out through payroll, either as an additional check or in their regular check, and those will show up on your payroll reports for you to enter into your QuickBooks or whatever general ledger system you may be using. And those can be allocated out based on any different category, any expense, department tracking, any way you want to categorize those, they can be customized to do so. So keeping track of your expense allocation is really important. And lastly, all receipts and expense reports are stored electronically. So they're really easy to get to in the event of an audit, or you need to look at them down the road, and so forth. So really slick process that we're going to take a look at right now. So let's switch on over to iSolved here. For an employee, once they're ready to go ahead and submit their expense report, it's really easy. They log right into myhrstuff.com, which of course everybody has access to today. They can click into their menu, and we're going to go to the new expense management module down here and go to My Expenses. From here, you can see there's a pending expense in here that I submitted earlier today. We can see it was a lunch with a client, so we can come in here, we can view what it was, who the client was. Again, these are customized fields. So we require, as you see, we go through this. I want to know if you're doing client engagement, which client did you take out, right? We need to document that purpose. What was the purpose of this event? Not going to do anything with this yet, but I'm going to go ahead and upload a new expense, right? So they can do this. They can snap right from their phone, or if they're on a computer, they can do this as well. Say we had some gas we need to be reimbursed for. So we can come in here. The expense name is gas for company vehicle, right? What date was it incurred, right? We can put just that. If we have a business purpose in here, we're going to put a client engagement here, and I'm going to put travel. If we also can customize this for mileage. So if we wanted to put a number of miles, and you can see it has the rate here. If you're doing a straight reimbursement, you could do the number of miles. We can also require the odometer beginning and ending time. So again, customize fields based on the type of expense. For this one, they're using a company vehicle, so we're just going to put the amount in here. So this was $25.98. Really cheap gas, because apparently we're back in 2020 here. If they were going to see a client, we can just put that in there. And we can put gas for company car. We can put that in here. As you can see, we have our expense policy built right in here. They can download your expense policy and view it right within the app. So they can go ahead and see that policy if they have questions about how it should work in there as well. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. We have our pending expenses in here now. Once this has been submitted, the employee's manager, or whomever you'd like, whether it's an admin or a manager, is going to get an email saying there is a new expense to be reviewed and approved. So I'm also a manager in this company. If I come to expenses and I go to tasks, now I'm going to see my employees' expenses, right? So I can come in here and see Hazel submitted a meal in here. I need to see exactly what this was. I can look at it. I can download the receipt and see what it was. And we can view that. I can reject it flat out, and that will reject it. I can return it and say, hey, this doesn't have enough information in, or I can approve it. Once I approve it, it'll be ready for the admin to run through payroll. So I'm going to go ahead and just approve this one. The employee is going to get an email approving that. We have this one, office supplies. I'm going to reject this one. Reason was, didn't meet company expense, or whatever it may be, right? The employee is now going to get alerted that this was rejected. If I return one, it's going to send it back to the employee for them to then come back and submit more information on that case. So all this is happening through the app, whether it's the manager reviewing it or an admin. We're going to go into the admin portal here in just a second and take a look at that as well. You can see exactly how that process works. This is all happening in the mobile app in myhrstuff.com. When we come back to our expense dashboard now, we're in the admin side of the system. So we have a number of items that have been submitted. We have a number of items that have been approved. So let's just, we don't have anything returned. We do have a couple blocked items. Let's just kind of look through this dashboard and see what we've got. So I'm going to come in here. We can come look through these. If I'm allowed to approve it, I can approve these expenses right through here. If I want, like this one, I can either approve this one or deny this one, right? So we can come in here. Maybe I want to reject this one because this one has an amount on it of $25, but it really says it was $102. So whoops, you must have screwed that one up. So I'm going to return this one, amount mismatch, right? Again, the employee is getting alerted to this, that this has happened. And if I come back over here, and if I log back in to my expenses, I should see a returned item here, says amount mismatch. So now I need to go in and say, yep, the real amount was whatever it was, and I can resubmit it. So we can continue to go back and forth with these in that manner, okay? As an admin, you can also come and enter expenses right here in the admin portal. So if we just need to add a new one, very similar, we come in and we can search by our employee. What date was this incurred? What type of expense was it? Meals, office supplies, however much it was. Is it reimbursable? I can attach my receipt, right? We have to have a business purpose for every expense. We can put notes in here as we want, and we can hit save. Okay, so we've added an expense, and we're going to go ahead and submit those on behalf of our employees. So if the employee doesn't want to do it, we can do it right within here. Again, in our dashboard, we have some information here, the total expenses by type, the amounts. We can look at the status, what's been reviewed, what's been approved, what hasn't been, so forth. We can look at the business purpose to see if all the approved business expense types. We can look at how long our items have been in queue, right? So some of these have been waiting for a long time, right? We want to figure out why that is and approve them. I can come back in here again, look at my expenses. This time, because they resubmitted it, you can see we're going to go ahead and approve this one. This is great, right? Go back to my dashboard. I can see all the blocked transactions. I can see a couple of these were rejected for whatever reason, though that's certainly allowed. We can see what may be in progress and what's approved. So now these have all been approved. They're ready to go. They need to be paid out, right? So what we have to do is we have to come in here and select these. And as part of the next payroll, we're going to add this either to the next regular check, or we're going to do an additional check on their check. So we can add it into their regular check. We can do a secondary check. Some people don't want things to get lumped into their regular check because they want it to be very clear that they are getting this reimbursement, right? So that's an option. You could also run a manual payroll today, write the check and be done with it. In this situation, I'm going to go ahead and do an additional check. It's going to ask me what type of check, and I can choose that. We can also do the next regularly scheduled check and hit commit. Once I've committed these, when we go in to run the next payroll, you're going to see on these employees that those expenses have been paid out. I'm going to come to my process payroll. Just like I would do any other payday payroll, I'm going to go ahead and process my payroll. Because this client has timekeeping, we are going to close the time cards. Preview again. Can look at my payroll register. Also want to look at my general ledger report, which I don't have. As I'm looking at these folks, so I have Riley Baldino. So Riley's getting an office supply reimbursement of $25 in this check. That's getting added into Riley's net check, okay? We had John Johnson. Joe Johnson's getting $102 in travel reimbursement, right? So these are going into their next check and being refunded as part of their payroll. So this is getting paid out within payroll. You can see all these totals. If we had the general ledger set up, which we don't have in my demo company here, but if we had that, you would see exactly in the general ledger how that gets paid out. So once we process payroll, the employees are going to get paid. Everyone's going to be happy. The reporting is perfect, and life is good, and we'll continue the process to keep going. So the approval process can be customized in any way you want, whether it's a manager or an admin, or maybe you want the accounting department to review and approve those. You can do it however you want. It can be customized all through the policies and procedures. We can customize all of the required fields and so forth right within the process and get this customized to meet your policy. So that's a really quick rundown of expense management. I do want to just remind everybody that the iSolve Go app is going away June 30th. So if you are still using the iSolve Go app, please, please, please get your employees onto myhrstuff.com. Really simple. It's a web-based, mobile friendly website, which you can save right to your phone. You can do everything you can do in the app and more, like we've seen today. We can do expense reimbursements right in there. And you can always get help. We do have help cards available. papertrails.com/help gets you right in there and gets you lots of answers about how to do things within myhrstuff.com. So our next month's training is on workers' comp as you go, kind of going over what that looks like, how it all works. We will have a special guest. We're going to have an insurance agent join us to give us a little bit more information about that. That's the 17th at 2 o'clock. So we will have more information on that. And I'm happy to take any questions. You can put those in the Q&A. You can put them in the chat. If you have questions about how things work, what we need to do, happy to answer any questions. So we have a question, is there a way to track mileage? So there's no way to track mileage like from a GPS perspective, but you can, as you saw, when we submit an expense reimbursement for mileage, we can require that the employee put the starting and ending odometer in there if you wanted to. You can also put, or just the total number of miles, and you can set that factor in there so it'll automatically track or calculate the mileage reimbursement based on the number of miles that they traveled. We can make the requirement, again, of where you went. We can create a custom field that says, from where did you come and where did you go? So you can kind of gut check those, but there's no GPS tracking per se. It's just it's kind of an honor system from the employees. Lots of checks and balances we can put in there, but nothing GPS right now. Give it another minute for questions. And of course, if expense management is something that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to do a more in-depth demo or talk more about your specific situations or whatever your questions may be. Not seeing any more questions on here, so we can wrap things up. But certainly feel free to reach out to Payroll Processor. We'll be happy to chat with you about expense management, what it looks like, how it works, how to customize it, and so forth. Otherwise, we'll talk to you next month, May 17th, for Workers' Comp as you go, and how we're going to manage that. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us today, and we will talk to you all very soon.